Here's something that might genuinely surprise you. The compulsory superannuation system, the one quietly taking 12% of almost every working Australian's pay and putting it away for retirement, is suddenly a live political battleground, and the fight is only just getting started. On one side, a sitting senator has called it one of the biggest public policy failures since Federation. On the other, the Treasurer himself says defending it will be one of the defining issues of the next federal election. And caught in the middle of all this are millions of Australians over 50, either already relying on this system or about to. So, today, no verdict, no picking a side, just the actual arguments from the actual people making them and what any of this could genuinely mean for your own retirement. Let's meet Sarah, and a version of Sarah who took a very different path to see exactly what's at stake. Let's start with what's actually been said, because this debate has genuinely escalated fast. A Liberal senator and the author of a book specifically calling for a redesign of the compulsory super system recently described the system as one of the biggest public policy failures since Federation, arguing it hasn't helped the budget and hasn't really helped many people get off the age pension. He's also called it, in his own words, an illiberal experiment, and suggested it's created a honeypot the finance industry, banks and unions have all been able to dip into. One Nation's leader has gone further, calling the system broken and pushing for Australians to be able to dip into their own super early to help fund a housing deposit. Her exact words on social media were that your super isn't the government's piggy bank. The Treasurer has responded firmly, describing the future of the compulsory system as one of the highest stakes issues heading into the next election, and Labor has argued that winding the system back would seriously damage the retirement security of millions of working Australians. And the super industry's peak body has pushed back hard too, pointing out that Australia's age pension spending has actually gone down since compulsory super began back in 1992, even as the population has aged. Two completely different stories about the same system. Let's see what actually happens to a real person under each version of it. Meet Sarah. She's 30 years old, on the median wage, with $30,000 already sitting in her super. She stays in the compulsory system exactly as it currently operates, contributing 12% of her wage every single year for the rest of her working life, never touching it early for any reason. According to modelling from the super industry's own peak body, a 30-year-old on the median wage with $30,000 in super today is projected to retire with roughly $610,000. That's the real current trajectory of the system critics are calling a failure. Worth noting too, the 12% contribution rate has only been in place since the middle of last year. Almost nobody retiring today has spent a full working life contributing at that rate, which is a point the industry makes directly in response to claims the system hasn't delivered, arguing that judging the system by the balances of people who spent most of their careers on 9% or less tells you very little about how it performs now. Now let's build the alternative scenario, based directly on what critics of the current system have actually proposed. One live proposal would let first home buyers withdraw up to $50,000 from their own super to help fund a housing deposit. So picture a second version of Sarah. Same age, same starting balance, same wage. At 30, she withdraws $50,000 from her super to help buy her first home, getting into the property market roughly 5 years sooner than she otherwise would have. That's a genuinely real, tangible benefit. Years of rising rent avoided, and real home equity building years earlier than the original Sarah managed. But here's the trade-off nobody can avoid, no matter which side of this debate they're on. That $50,000 left compounding inside super at a typical long-run return over the 35 years until retirement would have grown to somewhere around $534,000 by the time she stopped working. Pulling it out early doesn't just cost her $50,000, it costs her more than $500,000 of retirement compounding that never gets the chance to happen.
This second version of Sarah isn't reckless, and she's not wrong to want to buy a home sooner. She's just made a genuinely real trade, one that critics of the current system argue individuals should be allowed to make for themselves, and one that defenders of the system argue quietly shifts the cost back onto the public purse decades later, when a smaller retirement balance means leaning more heavily on the age pension. Let's give the defenders of the current system their full argument, fairly. Their central claim is that compulsory super has done exactly what it was designed to do. Even as Australia's population ages and the number of retirees keeps climbing relative to the working population, age pension spending as a share of the economy has actually fallen since the scheme began in 1992. That's the core of the industry's rebuttal to the claim that super hasn't helped the budget. They also argue the 12% rate is genuinely young. Most people currently drawing on their super spent decades contributing at a much lower rate, so early criticism of retirement outcomes is, in their view, measuring the old system rather than the one actually in place today.
And they point to modelling like Sarah's, a median wage worker on track for a genuinely comfortable $610,000 retirement balance as evidence the system is working as intended for people starting their careers now. Now, the other side, just as fairly, critics argue the system takes a substantial, compulsory cut of every worker's pay, money that would otherwise land directly in their pocket as wages, and locks it away for decades, regardless of what else that person might genuinely need it for right now, like a housing deposit in a market that keeps getting harder to enter. Their argument isn't that saving for retirement is bad, it's that a rigid, one-size-fits-all compulsory system doesn't account for the fact that a 30-year-old locked out of housing might rationally prefer some flexibility now, even at a real cost to their balance decades later. They also argue the sheer scale of the system, now sitting above $4.5 trillion, has created an enormous, largely unaccountable pool of money managed by people workers never chose and mostly never meet, with real questions worth asking about fees, governance, and whose interests are actually being served along the way. And they point to the same pension reliance question from the opposite direction, arguing that despite decades of compulsory contributions, a meaningful share of retirees still end up needing a full or part-age pension anyway, which they say undermines the core promise the system was originally sold on. Here's why this matters specifically if you're over 50 watching this. Nobody is proposing to touch the super balance you've already built. This entire debate is about the shape of the system going forward, the contribution rate, whether any early access provisions get introduced, and how much political appetite exists to change any of it. But if you're still working, still contributing, or helping a child or grandchild think through their own first home, the outcome of this fight over the next couple of years could genuinely shape the settings you or they retire under. It's worth watching, not because there's a clear right answer, but because both sides are making real arguments about a system that touches almost every working Australian. Two versions of Sarah, two entirely reasonable sets of priorities, and no clean verdict, because this genuinely isn't a settled question. One side sees a system quietly succeeding exactly as designed. The other sees a rigid, oversized mandate that doesn't trust individuals with their own money. Both are making real arguments backed by real numbers, and this is very likely heading toward the next federal election as a genuine point of difference between the parties. We're not here to tell you which side is right. We're here to make sure you actually understand the argument before it inevitably lands in your feed as a 30-second political slogan. If this helped you understand a debate you'll likely keep hearing about, hit subscribe for more videos unpacking the everyday money decisions Australians over 50 are actually making right now. And let me know in the comments, should compulsory super stay exactly as it is, or is it time for genuine reform? See you in the next one.